So you wanted to mention something about people asking about culture,
Yes.
organization culture. That's one of the biggest things you said. So you want to tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so I suppose everybody's aware that um, more recently, there is a lot more of a focus on culture. I think at one point, especially when I started out, over a decade ago, there wasn't much of a focus on culture. We kind of had this, oh yeah, we get like pizza in on a Friday, or we, like this sort of like generic thing that not everybody appreciates. And it's almost like the company is almost not condescending, but the more people I speak to, the more I hear is like, I'm looking for a company where they know me. I'm not just a number.
Mm-hmm.
Equally, companies want candidates that recognize the culture and the values of that company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go onto the website of any decent company, they will have company values.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they're looking for. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You need to recognize that and ask yourself two questions really. Do I agree with these values?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not going to be a good cultural fit, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and also like, does your culture expectations match up with that as an individual? Because otherwise, you're going to go in and you're not going to reinvent like their company culture. Um, and in a lot of interviews nowadays, you will get asked, what do you look for in a company culture?
Right.
Corporate, family, small business, big business? Do you want massive corporate events? Do you want drinks every Thursday? Do you want a hard working day? What is it? And you need to think about that as a candidate. You need to consider these things,
Okay.
you know, um,
So that's
because
actually a direct question that they're asking now, just to make sure that the candidate is a good fit for the
yeah,
company.
yeah,
And this also just illustrates the point that they're looking for people that want to stay with the company
yes,
because
yeah,
of all the effort that goes into recruiting from companies' point of view. They want to make sure that they get the right candidate first time.
yeah,
So a cultural fit is going to really help
yeah,
make sure that they yeah. So
yeah.
definitely need to think about what is it that they want in terms of the their life at work.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think these kind of two reasons this has come up. First off, I think there's a lot more weight put into like a company culture because it's in the news a lot more now about burnout. There used to be this thing about whoever gets in earliest and whoever leaves latest, like that's the best worker. And
Uh huh.
that's not the case anymore. As a
Mm-hmm.
culture, that's actually rejected. Like
Right.
people who kind of say, oh, I've been working like 70-hour weeks. Like that's not a flex anymore. Like
Okay.
and some of the best companies I work with, one of the best companies I work with, their staff come in at 10 and they leave at 4. And do you know what? It's one of the best working teams I've ever seen because everyone's respected, everybody's
Right.
time is respected. And culturally, that does absolute like so much for the team. And when that client is interviewing and they talk about culture, if someone's like, oh yeah, I work weekends, I work, and the client's like, no, no, no. Like, have you looked into our hours? Have you looked into our ethos? Like, there's nothing about a 10-4 and Monday to Friday that screams, I want you to work extra hours,
I've
and it's,
got
yeah,
I've got two great questions on this because in my previous interview with somebody who's done a lot of employment as a entrepreneur and company owner was more of the older mindset. So
right.
my question is, do you do you see, and I can see benefits to both,
Mm.
but am I right in thinking that the type of organisations that are happy to get the right cultural fit and don't want to burn employees out and are quite happy for them to come in for less hours but be very dedicated in those hours and then get along as a cultural thing, do they tend to be larger organisations? And would you say that smaller organisations are a little bit more of the older mindset, or is that just it just depends? There's no difference between bigger and larger, sorry, larger and smaller companies. It's just the mindset of the management and the owners, which is
Yeah, yeah. Do I don't think because I work with a lot of startups, and from a HR and recruitment perspective, but when I'm designing like how we onboard and how that culture looks and things like that, smaller companies definitely they're more aware of the demands and the needs for like a good culture. So I do tend to see that in a lot of smaller companies, which is funny because obviously they've got the like least budget. So investing in culture, it just shows like how much that investment's worth. With larger companies, it's a bit difficult because I think it does come down to like who's the manager, sector often really kind of, like in a lot of tech companies, it's very, really positive culture. Whereas like my background originally was engineering, and I see that in my clients as a lot more old school. Like you come in, you get your head down, you go home, end of story. Nothing wrong with that, because you know what, like the people that have worked in that environment for a long time really appreciate that. They know where they stand, they go in, they're not bothered about any bells and whistles. Definitely there's like a generational thing, whereas the people that are graduating now, the people who kind of lived through the pandemic, haven't known going into an office a 9 to 5, who haven't known anything other than, being really aware of the environment you're in and the people that you're around. I think that's where the difference comes in, personally. So like what your workforce demands from you, and then how that molds over time as, older generations leave the workforce.
Okay, that's really interesting. I want to move on to some other questions, but I'll just say that is such a testament to doing your research on the company and the organization, because you could go into the interview and I don't know, mate, talk about how much you worked, and then it be completely off with the culture of the organization that you're going for, when they don't value people that stay extra hours, but what they want is people to be well rested. And so you just have to be really sure and do your research and know what kind of culture and company that you're applying for. So thanks for that.